Health and Well-Being by Viv Trader. You will hear various experts share their knowledge within health and well-being. This podcast is based on facts and science. With knowledge, you can raise your awareness so that you can make better conscious decisions in your everyday life. Decisions that will benefit your health, the planet, and our future generations.
So today I have the real pleasure of meeting with Elizabeth Alton-Cara. Hello, Elizabeth. How are you doing?
Hi, good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm really well. Just got back from a walk with my dog. It's late afternoon here for us in Sweden, and you are in New Jersey.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It's still earlier over here, around noon. But yeah, that's great. I'm happy to be here talking to you today.
Yeah, we have a very important topic to cover today. I'm super excited to dig into this. We're going to talk about eating disorders. So would you like, Elizabeth, to give, for the people out there, a short presentation of yourself and what you do?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Liz Alton-Cara. I'm the Director of Education at the National Eating Disorders Association. So we are the largest nonprofit organization in the U.S., and we focus on eating disorders. So our mission is really to support individuals and families who are affected by these illnesses. And in my role as the Director of Education, I'm in charge of our resources, like the information and the resources that we have on our website. And we are also in the process of creating a resource center, resource library on our website. That's really going to be the information hub for the eating disorder community. So I've been with this organization for almost 8-9 years now.
Wow.
And prior to this role, I was I was involved with our helpline. We have an information and treatment option helpline in various capacities. But currently, as a Director of Education, I oversee our blog and then all the content that you see on our website at nationaleatingdisorders.org.
And the support line is available throughout all states in the USA?
Yeah, it's national. It's for for people who are looking information and resources for eating disorders. So as you can imagine, I know we're going to talk more about eating disorders today, but they are very complex illnesses, and we believe that they need to be treated by professionals who specialize in eating disorders. And sometimes, in some parts of the U.S., it's really hard to find those specialists. There are some remote areas as well as treatment centers. So we are helping people kind of connect to those resources.
Oh, beautiful. Now, what is an eating disorder? Would you mind clarifying that?
Yeah, sure. We define eating disorders as biopsychosocial illnesses. So they arise from a combination of biological, psychological, and social factors. And they are serious illnesses, but they are treatable. And they can affect anyone. It doesn't really matter. They don't discriminate. It affects people of all genders, all ages, all sexual orientations, all religions, all weights, all body shapes. So there's this misconceptions that eating disorders only affect certain type of people, but that's not true. So anybody can suffer from an eating disorder. And there are different types of eating disorders, and as I said, they are serious but treatable. Unfortunately, they have the second highest mortality rate out of all psychiatric illnesses, only followed, surpassed by opioid use. So they have a very high mortality rate if not treated. However, there are a lot we can do in terms of prevention, and there's also a lot that can be done in terms of treatments. So that's why it's really important to talk about eating disorders, to be able to recognize the signs and to intervene early. So those are really the key. And, when we talk about eating disorders, there are a few that people know more about, like anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, binge eating disorder. There's also ARFID, which stands for avoid and restrictive eating and feeding disorder. And there's also OSFED, otherwise specified eating and feeding disorder. So there's a variety of disorders, but they are usually around people's concerns around food, dieting, and also they have psychological and physical consequences, health consequences. So that's kind of a brief overview of eating disorders.
Yeah, are they on the rise? the eating
They
disorders?
are on the rise, unfortunately, especially after the pandemic. We've seen a big rise in like the first year following the pandemic. We've been hearing that the inpatient admissions for adolescents has doubled the ER admissions in the US. So it's been really a critical time for our community. And, we are currently in a mental health crisis. And, eating disorders are unfortunately one of the illnesses that are on the rise.
I'm sorry to hear. Now, how does an eating disorder develop?
Yeah. As I said, there are biopsychosocial illnesses. There are certain risk factors that can put people at risk to develop an eating disorders. So when we talk about biological risk factors, you can think about family history. If you have somebody in your family who's been affected by an eating disorder, or history of dieting, so that can put somebody at risk, or in general, genetic predisposition can put someone at risk to develop an eating disorder. And when we look at the psychological risk factors, it is anxiety, depression, low self-esteem. Those are all the psychological risk factors that can lead somebody to develop an eating disorders. And there's also the social part of it. So unfortunately, we are all living in a diet culture, right? So we are all bombarded with messages that our bodies should look a certain way. And this cultural norms that overvalue appearance that can lead somebody to an eating disorder. And there is also weight stigma and bullying that can also put someone at risk for an eating disorder.
Oh, this is a massive problem. It's such a big scope.
Yes, they are very complex.
What can you do? As a parent, I had 3 kids myself. What can you do as a parent to prevent your child from getting an eating disorder?
That's such a great question. That's such an important question to ask. And I think the first thing is really to know the warning signs of eating disorders. So it is always better to intervene as early as possible because, a child may be showing some signs of disordered eating. And it's really important to intervene before this turns into a full-blown eating disorder. And the other thing is we know that body dissatisfaction, like negative body image, has been a big risk factor in terms of developing an eating disorder. So it is really important to encourage, children to have a positive body image, and also, to help them build their self-esteem. And as parents, we also have to look at our own relationship with food. Children always model their parents' behaviors, so we really have to be careful about how we talk around food, how we talk about our bodies. It's also really important to emphasize diversity. Like, not all bodies are the same, and that's okay. Our bodies are different based on our genetics, based on our race, ethnicity. So there are a lot of different factors that influence one's body size and shape. And, unfortunately, as I said before, there's this ideal body appearance, body shape that's been really fed into us in social media, in media in general, all the societal messages that we receive. So that's why, unfortunately, children and adolescents and anybody of any age feel that pressure to look a certain way and change their bodies. And we know that dieting, in order to change how you look, is a big risk factor into developing an eating disorder. So, as a parent, just knowing all this, again, emphasizing diversity and building that self-esteem is really important. And really kind of trying to help your children get at a point where they are mindful, of what they are consuming, and also they are critical of the messages that they are receiving from social media. And we know that now children, even at a younger age, start using social media. And all the images that we see on social media, all the filters that they can use to alter those images, that can really be problematic, if a child is already engaging in disordered eating behaviors. So having an open conversation with your child, welcoming them to have that conversation. Some people believe that eating disorders can be a phase and then children will grow out of it. Unfortunately, that's not the case. People don't choose to have an eating disorder, and they are not a phase. So that's why it's important to intervene. It's important to recognize the warning signs And we also have a screening tool on our website at nationleadingdisorders.org. It's meant to be for children, teens, 13 years and up. So it can help determine if it's time to seek professional help. I mean, it's not a diagnostic tool, but it can be used to see if the person is at risk. Yeah, at risk to develop an eating disorder.
You were saying children, what age are we talking about here? From what age can children develop an eating disorder? What age range?
I mean, it's getting younger and younger, but usually, parents notice some changes in even preteens or teen ages, when they're really young. And as I said, we always talk about some warning signs. The warning signs to look out for is weight fluctuations, either up or down physically. And you may notice that the poor concentration, like difficulty concentrating in the child, sometimes dizziness or upon standing, and there may also exhibit some issues with dental, skin, hair, and nail health. So those are kind of some of the physical signs. And in terms of emotional signs or psychological signs, you may notice a lot of mood swings in your child. And they become socially withdrawn usually. And then you notice that the weight loss, dieting are becoming primary concerns. And they also may engage in frequent body checking, kind of looking at themselves in the body and, comparing themselves to others. And they may also engage in some food rituals, like you may see some different ways they're consuming food.
Wow, I'm thinking like mood swings. What teenager doesn't have mood swings? And it's, can be hard to tell. Yeah.
And definitely. And the other part that's so important, because eating disorders are also very secretive in nature. Like those who are struggling from eating disorders, they usually feel ashamed of the behavior that they are engaging in. So it is really difficult for them to have this conversation. So that's why as parents, it's really important to kind of try to have that open communication, judgment-free communication. So that is why we always say, read about eating disorders, know about eating disorders, know the sign, and just understand that nobody chooses to have an eating disorder. So it's not something that children engage to get attention, or it's not a phase.
Yeah, I was telling you before we started that if you have a child that's slightly overweight or underweight, how do you address this with your child without, being judgmental or affecting the self-esteem? Is super difficult. How do you approach?
No, that's definitely, I mean, obviously it is really important to understand first if there are any underlying medical condition that may be affecting the child's weight. But otherwise, it's really important to really embrace that diversity. And, instead of making any comments about the appearance, really focusing on how they can enjoy their bodies, how they can move their bodies, and really accept that everybody is beautiful, like regardless of their shape or size. Embracing that is really important, instead of really focusing on the size or the shape of the body.
So just give them the unconditional love.
Pretty much, yeah. That's very important.
So what can you do as a parent to help your child create a healthy relationship with food? So they have the best opportunity to thrive in life?
Yeah. Again, the first step is really to look into your own relationship with food. How do you relate to food? What are some messages that you send out around food? Because as I said, children are really going to model your behaviors. For that reason, have a look at that. And also, we never say, there are bad foods or good foods. Food is food. It's really about that mindful eating, being able to recognize hunger cues and satiety cues. Those are really important to be able to have that connection with yourself and to be able to, say, okay, I'm hungry now, or okay, I'm full now. So those are the things. And unfortunately, when kids or anyone starts into that cycle of dieting, that's when things may get out of control, because that's when they really lose that connection with their their bodies, and it's just a diet plan that tells you whenever you're full or whenever you're hungry. So intuitively, we all have that when we are born. Like, we know when we are full, we know when we are hungry, but with time and with dieting and with all those social pressures, unfortunately, that really affects the way we consume food. And food, we need to be able to enjoy food. So it's all about that balance. And like, as a parent, it's really important to think about all this and not categorize food as bad or good. So those are really important things to remember when we are around children.
Yeah, very true. It's so. What's the percentage of the population having an eating disorder in the US? Do you have any numbers?
Yeah, 28.8 million Americans will experience an eating disorder at some point in their lives. So it's really high. As I said, they don't discriminate. It doesn't matter, like any race, any gender, any socioeconomic status can suffer from an eating disorder. So it's a big issue. And there are also issues with access to care, I believe not only in the US, but across the globe. We need to have more eating disorder specialists, more eating disorder treatment facilities. Since they are such complex disorders, it's really best to seek help from somebody who specializes, who has special training and experience in these illnesses. So that's really the key. But eating disorder treatment, I'm talking about the US, it's costly. Some insurance companies don't cover the level of treatment that's needed. So unfortunately, people really face a lot of issues when they're trying to access care for their eating disorder. And that's hopefully, in the future, everybody is going to be able to access the care that they need.
I get a feeling, I have done some interviews about sugar addiction, and I can see a correlation between the sugar addiction and the society we're living in, with we should eat and we should diet, and with sugar addiction, they say that, you get the carbohydrates, processed food, sugar, it's hard to stop. Once you start eating, you can't, and you need to have a specialist as well, addiction specialist, otherwise you can't get out of it. And as you said, that you can't outgrow an eating disorder, you actually need help.
Yeah. And when we talk about need, it's really a multidisciplinary team of professionals that we always recommend people to work with. So, there's usually a nutritionist, there's usually a psychiatrist, a medical doctor, a therapist who would really, the nutritionist will help with the nutritional aspect. They can help with a meal plan. They can help support the person that way. And then a therapist can really focus on the psychological aspects of an eating disorder. And we said, it has a lot of physical consequences. So a medical focus on that, and psychiatrically as well. Sometimes medications may be needed, so it's really important to work with a psychiatrist as well, so that they can kind of monitor the medication. So that's another thing. It's really important to really connect with this treatment team, and depending on the person's needs and with symptoms, the severity of symptoms, there are different levels of care. So if the person needs 24/7 monitoring, like if they are not medically stable, then they may need an inpatient level of treatment. Or if they are more stable, they can be in a residential setting. And if they can function medically, then they can either be in a day treatment or an intensive outpatient program. And there are also, people who may be okay by just seeing a therapist, a nutritionist, a doctor on an outpatient basis. So it's really, an assessment is crucial by a professional who can really recommend the level of care that the person needs.
And how is the percentage between men and women? Obviously men also get eating disorders, right?
Yes. So that's another conception about eating disorders. We always used to think that it's a female issue, but we know that men also suffer from eating disorders. Again, percentage-wise, there are still more women than men. However, men do get eating disorders. So that's another area that we are trying to raise awareness of. Don't think that if you have a son, they are not, they're kind of they cannot have an eating disorder. We've heard all these stories. Unfortunately, because of that stigma or misconception, men may get diagnosed at a later age, which is, as we said, early intervention is the key. So for that reason, education. We really have to talk more about these issues and make people understand that it doesn't matter, your gender doesn't matter, your race doesn't matter. Like we can all get affected by an eating disorder.
And for men, what is the most common eating disorder? Is it bulimia or anorexia? Which one?
They can any one of them. They can get affected with any one of them. I mean, the kind of the way it presents could be a little bit different than women, because when we think about those societal kind of ideals, we usually see women should be at a lower weight, and then they need to be lean, and then versus men, there's that emphasis on being more masculine, having more muscles. Yeah, so that could be a little bit different how they present. However, in the end, there is this kind of body dissatisfaction that is leading the person to engage in these behaviors.
So if someone calls your support line, how serious is it? Like, are people almost close to dying, or what does that look like, the scale, when people are getting in touch with you?
Yeah, we see people from any level of change. We try to refer to people, when we think about eating disorders or any kind of mental illness, we try to think in terms of like where people are in terms of being ready for change. So people can be at any point in a pre-contemplative state of change where they may realize they may have a problem, but they can still be in that denial phase. They may still believe that it's nothing important, it's going to go away. And there are also people who are ready to change, who are in the action phase and ready to seek for help. And in terms of severity, they can be on anywhere on the spectrum. Like, we get calls from people who are saying that they've been dealing with medical emergency symptoms. They describe very severe symptoms, and that's when we encourage them to go to the ER right away. And there may also be people who maybe at the earlier stages, they're engaging in this disordered eating patterns, not maybe a full-blown eating disorder, but that's when our role is to really educate, provide psychoeducation, and also direct them to our screening tool so that they can determine if it's time to seek help.
And how long time does it take to develop an eating disorder?
It's obviously not overnight. However, it's really unique to the person. It depends. But as I said, like, you usually see those warning signs early on, that changes in mood. And you had a great point. We usually in teenage years, we've all been through that. So that's why I feel like it's really important to have that open communication with your child. If you've already established that open communication, then you may want to explore a little bit about their relationship with food. Kind of, as I said, teach them how to be critical about all the messages that they received from social media, from the media, around appearance, about those beauty ideals. So basically, it may take time. You'll see those disordered eating behaviors, and then unfortunately, if it's not treated, it turns into a full-blown eating disorder. And at any stage, like, we don't want people to wait until they're at that stage where they have very serious symptoms. So it's really, for any kind of disordered eating, even if it doesn't kind of categorize as an eating disorder, it's really important to seek professional help.
And you can get an eating disorder at any age in your life. I mean, I read women entering menopause because of the hormonal changes are very much more likely to obtain an eating disorder because of a new phase in life. Is that true?
That is true. And thank you so much for bringing that up, Viv. That's such an important topic. And we always hear from people in their midlives who are struggling from an eating disorder, like who develop an eating disorder in their midlife, or they've been struggling, even if they are older. So menopause is really a big transition point in a woman's life, and transitions are really hard for someone who is dealing with a mental health issue, and especially eating disorder. And with menopause, women's bodies change. They change, and that could be really a trigger point for someone who may already be predisposed at developing an eating disorder.
Anyone can just be a victim. No one is, as you said, is just being aware.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you think getting the kids involved in kitchen and helping cook dinners and being part of the creation of dinners and meals is that preventative? Do you think that?
I mean, it could be kind of like anything that you would do to normalize eating and enjoying food, because food is such a big part of any culture. We celebrate with food, we get together around food. So normalizing that and teaching kids to have fun with that, it's really important. I mean, there's one aspect of nourishing your body, but there's that social aspect as well. And the more you normalize it, the better it is. And we know that eating disorders, like for people who are experiencing an eating disorders, holidays are a hard time, because holidays are always usually around food. There's a big emphasis on food. So while they are growing up, the more you normalize, kind of getting together around food, and that's part of life, and that's nothing wrong about that. Because the problem is, we've been always taught that there's a big meal, there's a holiday, and then you have to compensate for it afterwards. So there's no such thing. It's all about balance, and it's all about having that mindful eating and knowing your body and being able to be in touch with your body, so that you can really kind of get the messages that your body is telling you. But I mean, those are all great ideas with children, having them more involved with meal prep.
Binge eating, is that linked to obesity as well? Have you seen a correlation from binge eating and the obesity epidemic we have in the Western world?
I mean, people who are suffering with binge eating, they may be in higher weight bodies, but we cannot kind of say that there is a cause. Not everybody who is in a higher weight suffers from a binge eating disorder, or not everybody who suffers from binge eating disorders are in a higher body weight. So it's really important to emphasize that. As with all eating disorders, binge eating disorder, it really has that psychological component as well. So it is really emphasized. So for that reason, we always say, it's important to work with a group of professionals, a therapist, a nutritionist, a doctor.
Yeah. And in general, how long time does it take to heal from an eating disorder once you have developed and is in full swing till full recovery? If you ever can recover fully, I'm not too sure. Can you do that?
Yeah, it's really hard to answer that question in terms of the timing. How long does it take? Because it really depends on the person. One thing I can say, though, we believe that full recovery is possible with the right help and support. And also, I know that the definition of recovery may depend on the person as well. Like for some people, it could just be kind of stopping and engaging in those disordered eating behaviors. But for others, it could be that, and kind of getting rid of that psychological mechanism that leads you to an eating disorder. I mean, you may stop engaging in those behaviors, but you can still think about food, you can still think about bodies all the time, right? So the other thing is we relapse. Relapse happens, and we try to normalize relapse, because it's really part of recovery. It's not a straight line, it's up and down, and it's really important for the person to learn those tools, in therapy, to be able to get through a relapse. And support is really important as well. So that's something that we haven't talked about, but support is essential in eating disorder recovery. And also support may look different different for everyone. So for some people, it could be like calling them every day and checking up on them. For other people, it just being there for them whenever they need you. So it's really important to have this open conversation with the person. And, as a family, if you're supporting your child, know as much as you can around eating disorders. Let the treatment team know if you want to be part of the treatment journey. And it's like for families and for loved ones as well, it's really important to get support for themselves. This is a long road. It takes a lot of energy and time to recover, and it may not be easy sometimes being in that support role. So in the US, there are a lot of support groups for families, parents, loved ones as well. So we always encourage people to get advantage of them.
Yeah, of course. I wouldn't think, if you have a child, for instance, suffering and it must be very tricky and difficult and emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Certainly.
When was eating disorders discovered? Like, how did they evolve? Like, how did we start calling it an eating disorder? How long has it been around, the term?
I mean, they've been around for a long, long time. Like when you look at history, like, currently in the US, we define any kind of mental illness based on DSM. We call it the diagnostic manual. But, they have been around for years and years, especially those disordered eating behaviors. But, eventually with this diagnostic criteria, you can really put a name on it. And it also helps with insurances, obviously. You have to have those diagnostic codes for professionals to get reimbursed. And there's a lot of debate around that as well, like those diagnostic criteria. However, it's nothing new, but it's important to remember that social component of it, right? So as I said, biopsychosocial, I feel like lately that social part is really putting a lot of pressure on kids, on teens, on any one of us, that diet culture, because like anybody can access media right now from their phones. And it wasn't the case in earlier ages. And, that those messages around certain body ideals, body appearances, we are being bombarded by them. So unless you really have that critical eye and critical thinking, it's really hard to be immune, to the messages that you're receiving. So for that reason, like it is really important kind of not to believe in everything that you see, like in terms of the photos and everything, because they are being distorted. All at the same time, like trying to build that self-esteem and body satisfaction, and just celebrating diversity in bodies.
Yeah, beautifully said. Absolutely agree with you 100%. Is there anything else, Elizabeth, you'd like to add to the people out there before we finish our call for today?
Yeah, I mean, again, thank you so much for giving me the time and space to talk around eating disorders. Again, if you need more information, if you need help, you can always come to our website at nationaleatingdisorders.org. We are a US-based organization, but we have a lot of information around eating disorders. And don't be afraid to ask for help. As I said, those are really secretive disorders that can be very alienating, but help is out there, and you're not the only one. There are a lot of people who are struggling with these issues, and the earlier we can intervene, the better it is for the person.
Oh, lovely. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate that. That was lovely.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
I hope you got some valuable information today that will help you increase your health and well-being. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.